I know, now we're so quiet. Gosh.
Here we
That was
go.
it was a raucous kind of warm up.
Yeah. It's good
Great
to
to be
see
back
all of
together,
you.
Lee. My God. I wish
Hopefully
I could
we
hug
got
you.
it all out of our system now.
No,
It's
it's
been
not
too
out.
long.
I want to hug Lee. Lee, it's been too long.
Okay, here we are, episode 22 question mark
Seriously?
of D3TV, and I'm here with Jonathan Blessing, CEO of D3, and Lee Azzarello, who is a former colleague of both Jonathan and mine at Series Digital,
And a current friend, right?
Current friend, former colleague, and Lee is a senior software engineer at Momentous, and we'll talk more about what that is and what it means and what Momentous is briefly. And I'm Liz Flyntz, Director of UX and Design at D3.
And I think what we should be upfront about what we're going to discuss, what the itinerary is here.
Yeah, first we're going to talk about what Lee does, which is launch rockets recently and now launch drive satellites, and with a steering wheel just like that. And
I think just to be more to kind of be blunt about this is going to be about Lee, all about Lee.
Everything
20 minutes about Lee.
And then we're going to talk about art a little bit, which also relates to Lee, because Lee is an accomplished digital artist and also a musician.
Yeah, and a space DJ.
And Lee lives in San Francisco, and you can see a little piece of San Francisco behind him. That's a real background. That's not a fake San Francisco background.
The virtual background of Victorian in San Francisco. Yeah, I'm on the top floor, thus the angled.
Can you turn on your chandelier, Lee? Just to kind of up the production value of our video.
But it'll give me too much backlight. There's a window in front of me, so that's why it looks so good.
So I don't know. So we last left off how many years ago?
It was a while. I think
2017, 2016.
I think it was 2017. Yeah, probably early 2017. Because I went to Tour Camp in 2016. Tour Camp is a hacker camp in the Pacific Northwest. It's every 2 years. It's really fun. If anyone who's listening to this in the future reads about it, you should check it out.
Okay. I'm adding that to the list of links. Yeah.
All right.
I don't know.
I don't want to step on your show here, so I'm just gonna play my part, do kind of the color commentary while you ask the serious questions.
Well, Lee works for a very high security industry, and so I'm not entirely certain what he can and cannot talk about.
Just to throw it out there, like I'll tell you if there's too much detail. Usually the details are very specific and esoteric and/or financial, because it is a publicly traded corporation.
Yeah, so this is, I guess that's something to talk about. So now private companies go to space all the time. This is a big new thing, newish thing.
They sure do.
And that's what you do. You help private companies do space stuff.
Yes.
And it used to be rocket stuff, and now it's satellite stuff. Can you talk about the rocket stuff and then talk about the satellite stuff?
Yeah. I spent a little over 3 years at a company called Astra. Astra does rocket launches for small payloads. I was part of 7 of those. 6 of them flew. The one that didn't fly was the first one. So that was a very intense introduction to aerospace as a profession. There were, I think, 3 successful orbital flights that deployed a number of small satellites. Some of them you could hold in your hands, like an iPhone that would be a cube, basically. There's a company called Swarm out here that is building a whole like business to business satellite ground telemetry platform.
What were you doing yourself though at Astra, Lee?
I was doing ground software, which is I think the easiest, well, I don't know if it's the easiest, but I think the more accessible metaphor would be it's similar to like real-time streaming data that you would get through like stock exchanges or like a Twitter that has like social media feeds that are constantly streaming.
But what is ground software?
So all of the stuff that doesn't fly, which includes testing. So testing and QA for really for most hardware, but especially things that fly. The data from testing hardware, like articles or whole assemblies, is really important, and the data is basically like considered like intellectual property of the company.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're qualifying an engine before you want to make like 50 of them, there's a lot of analysis that goes into that. So like one of the more exciting tests was a hot fire, where like there's this indoor test cell that was leased from the Navy in the Alameda Navy base, and the engine would fire indoors. And during those different durations, there's at least there are hundreds of sensors hooked up to anything possible. That was all analog data that was being converted into digital, and then streamed out to a very elaborate pipeline.
And were you designing the pipelines and queues, or?
I was building the infrastructure. So I came in after someone had designed a proof of concept of like, this can work. One of the, I think, notable, interesting points at Astra, and also this is what's going on at Momentus from a ground software perspective, is that people like me and my colleagues have a lot of expertise in like cloud computing, distributed computing, and open source software. And the aerospace industry typically does not employ people with that type of background. So we came in to this, really kind of cutting edge. Like when you think about it, like rockets were one of the first applications of computer programming. So like historically speaking, it's like they were really cutting edge, but it's for whatever reason I actually haven't really like thought about this too hard. Though I am writing some chapters for a book on it, maybe one day. The software culture kind of stayed in the Apollo program, like mindset. Obviously, they're not using core memory and like wire and wound stuff, but like the mindset kind of stayed in that. Sometimes for a good reason, because like crewed flights, safety critical and stuff like that. But so we came in, and there was a lot of the people that were like these high end mechanical engineers and like aerospace flight people. And they were like, no, we use LabVIEW. And LabVIEW is literally like a Windows 95 era graphical desktop application that worked really good 20 some years ago. But it was designed for one operator, sits in front of one workstation, has a test. They manually initiate the test and then carry the data on a disk.
So you got to be the revolutionary. You got to play the role you like to play.
Yeah, kind of. And fortunately, I had other people to. It's a team effort. But yeah, and like a lot of it was proving that these open source components could be built in a way where not only would it work equivalent to some of the older legacy software platforms, but it would work better in that the data would be delivered closer to real time. The quantity could be massively increased. So like in the end, we had tens of thousands of measurements across literally different physical facilities, and it was all basically powering the entire campus. And through that, we were able to adapt it for launch infrastructure, which is a whole different subject.
I wish I could show everyone the pictures from this, because the space is amazing. And this I don't know what you call that.
I gave Liz a tour right before quarantine, but
I
they
saw
are
some photos.
very illegal to show the photos.
I was very, very envious.
Very bright.
Nerdy. Can I ask a quick nerdy question, Lee? So how hard was it to time synchronize all the flows from the various sensors?
So the DACs, I don't know why they're all called that in jargon, because they're actually analog to digital converters, not the other way around. But those are still National Instruments. Like those are very expensive, high-end, really tight tolerance electronics that are connected to special purpose embedded computers that have real-time operating systems on them. So that's all fine. And then on the other end of that, there's another specialized computer that has a very tight loop, and that loop is spitting the raw data out to a queue, and then from there that's where all of the part of the pipeline that I worked on and maintained.
Is it at kind of sensor inception?
I'm sorry. I actually have a quick answer to this. It's 100 hertz. So okay. Everything's sampled at 100 hertz. Some of the tests want to be 1,000 hertz, like some of the test engineers want 1,000 hertz.
But at the indexing level, but when you need to kind of collate this and index it, are the sensors also originating timestamps inside of the same kind of time? Okay.
It's a time series database, specifically.
But at the sensor level.
InfluxDB.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay.
And they have some of them have nanosecond timings, but it's generally not useful for these types of systems, unless it's a control loop coming back, which is some of the software that I touched but didn't go too deep into, did have control loops where measurements coming in could be used to change states in an elaborate state machine system. So like sequences could be developed. So like if once like a LOX tank gets to a certain temperature, gets cold enough for like the lines to be cold enough to flow liquid oxygen, that could trigger another.
That was going to be my next nerdy question before I let Liz drive this. This sensor data, was it being used to drive control systems, or was it purely for reporting and analysis?
Both.
Okay, sweet. So were you doing the control systems too?
Yes. I wasn't. So the actual like software development of that and was something that was a little bit farther from my purview, but I help people debug stuff, and it's all custom. That's where the stuff got kind of like proprietary enough, but like I could still talk about it, where like the documentation wasn't that good. So a lot of the things were like, well, if you want to know what like math functions are available, you open this file and read the source code.
Great. Yeah. It's self-documenting.
I mean, it's Python. Everyone knows how that works. I also learned how a general non-special built Python interpreter can keep 100 hertz loop real good. And the timing, we had a decent, like really good metrics on the timing, because obviously like the control room engineers want to have this assurance that the timing is what they expect it is. Python.
What about
great.
Okay, I have a business question. So who is and obviously you don't have to name names, but I'm just curious, like broadly industries, like who is commissioning paid private launches, and what do the satellites do? Like when you send up a little satellite that's like one of the handheld ones that you were talking about, what are they? What's their purpose?
The last launch was a NASA launch, but two launches ago, the payload was I think 22 I think they're called like nanosats or something, were deployed for a company called Swarm, and Swarm does I looked at their website. They're a business-to-business platform that they sell to companies that want to build out some kind of like satellite telemetry and ground stations. So they have like hardware that you could set up on the ground to receive, to process the data, and then they have this constellation of satellites that are orbiting so much that they don't really have to do like passes, because there's just so many of them, and they can communicate with each other. I think agriculture is a hot industry, so like you could get like some kind of satellite data about farming.
Just to chime in for a second, Liz, 1/3 of us is having this discussion over satellites.
Right? Yeah, Starlink is another one.
Yeah, no, I'm here in rural Vermont, and the only way I can participate in anything like this is over Starlink.
It is pretty cool. We won't
There's a,
get into the politics of
I know, we're
one
going to
of the
set that
funders
aside.
of that corporation.
Set it aside.
But
Let it go, Lee.
SpaceX has very reliable rocket launches. Momentous, my current employer, is a satellite company and has currently a vehicle that is orbiting right now that was deployed on a Falcon 9. So good job, SpaceX.
Yeah, no, it's pretty. I think I've got a 40 millisecond trip to the internet.
Huh. That's
So
better than the Wi-Fi some places.
I know, and actually, it might even be a little better at the moment. It fluctuates, but on average, if you expect 40 milliseconds, you're going to be happy with what you get.
is telecommunications the preeminent user of satellites? It's mostly telecommunications that's using it.
In terms of private stuff, yes. The Department of Defense's intelligence community, so that's especially the NRO, that's the National Reconnaissance Organization, and the NSA, and there's another one which is the geospatial. I forget the full three-letter acronym there. So there's a lot of government contracts that go into this in the satellite industry.
And they're presumably doing surveillance imaging stuff.
They're keeping us safe.
Yeah.
And then also Astra's last launch, which unfortunately was a failure to deploy the payload, but it's part of a 3-launch program for a special NASA-sponsored project called Tropics that's using some new microwave radio technology to do weather prediction. And I went to some science fair presentations with a NASA rep on that, and that sounds like legit cool. Where like hurricane prediction could be optimized for like more preemptive, like evacuation schedules, and more accuracy. As the planet gets hotter and hotter. I don't want to be a bummer, but I gotta throw a little out there. At least there's some nerds that are working on some good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly convenient that we can get these like high altitude imaging from satellites rather than from, say, having to fly a plane over them and take, which is what my father did, like flew planes that would take large format photographs, and then you had to fly the plane home and take the film out and have the film developed, and then an expert would review the footage that had been filmed on still large negatives, and that was like how you got high altitude imaging of the Earth's surface back in the day. I mean, it wasn't really that long ago, I mean, it's after Apollo. It's like, this is 1973, 74-ish. So
well, I think from what I've been reading, due to my current position, which is very new, it's been less than a month in the satellite world, but I had some exposure at Astra to what is currently called avionics. And I'm going to get this wrong in terms of dates because it's still a new kind of like specialty field to me, but that field of avionics as like a class of like engineering, I think was created in the 1980s, maybe 70s in some like skunkworks stuff, but I feel like it is fairly contemporary in terms of like what, capabilities of powered flight kind of stuff.
So let me just ask a quick question about Astra, Lee. Were they doing low Earth orbit only, or were they doing geosync stuff?
Only low Earth orbit.
Okay.
Can you tell us what that means?
Yes. I in a couple of months, I'll probably be able to go into much more detail. But it's a low Earth orbital velocity is 7.5 kilometers per second, and it's close.
And that's the speed. That's the speed you need to maintain in order to not fall out of orbit.
To not get pulled back in by gravity. And it's very busy. There used to be a cool website called Stuffin.space, but it's currently down. All of the actual data from actual orbiting low Earth orbit satellites right now is public. The United States Space Force, and I say that unironically, is the agency that provides that data. And this was an art project. There was an Ars Electronica grant that sponsored Stuffin.space, but I think the website went down. So yeah, it's like close to the Earth. You can get very good imaging because, you know, like the lens on this thing, I do have another Apple product, but that's my work phone. The lens on this thing is so good. Like people are putting like off the shelf cell phone type components, like radiation hardened, because, you know, there's no atmosphere. The sun will mess up your electronics up there, but they're putting like, you know, off the shelf electronics components in satellites and getting amazing results. There is some video on Twitter. I forget exactly what the company is, but it's like a satellite selfie stick. In that, like the satellite's payload was like it had some mechanical arm that kind of came up, and there's a camera on the other end, so it would film the satellite, but it would also film the Earth. And like the resolution of this, it's like, oh my God. Like,
you should send, I want you to send that to me, Lee. I'd love to see that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a far cry from the Apollo astronauts taking a photograph out the window, like
Can I ask
as an afterthought.
I want to ask kind of a work culture question. So, because you know me, Lee, I'm you know, so if you remember Sirius Digital, that's a similar to vibe to Door 3. But what is the vibe like as an engineer in the world of rockets and satellites?
It's there's a lot of it. It's very it's a team effort. This stuff is really complicated and requires a lot of trust between people who have specialties and a lot of specialization. But also, I think, you know, from me and my little niche of colleagues, I think a lot of our expertise is that we have more general purpose experience, and we could interface with a lot of the systems that were previously considered specialized. So there's also room for like sort of general purpose skills. And I found that those who get that and are like accept that there's sometimes, especially with these like new space startups, getting out of your comfort zone and like learning something new and moving a little bit like interdisciplinary teams wise is important. Have a really like it's amazing to work with people on that level. There's also some big egos because like, you know, it's like rockets. There's like a bunch of energy. There's fire. It's exciting and just, you know.
Why do you think that? Why do you think you're so good at that? And there's a correct answer to this.
What she's saying is don't fall in the trap door.
Oh, I know the right answer. Because Liz and I are privileged enough to have an education from a small liberal arts college in Ohio called Antioch that taught us that not just academic curriculum-based learning, but experiential learning is something that's important. And
entropy is happening. Yeah, entropy is happening all the time, all around you. You need to go with the flow. And if there's no better teacher of that lesson than Antioch College.
Are you really kind of elicited a plug for Antioch?
I really did.
Oh my gosh. Shameless.
But yeah, I think
kids,
so.
If you want to launch rockets.
No, basically, you know, like it's within your grasp, you know, like a little hippie school, lefty school in the Midwest, you know, you know, you can end up
but I
doing
think
things
also
you wouldn't
like
have thought of.
I mean, you really, your background is super interdisciplinary, and like you studied music, for instance, and computer programming, but you know, you've done such a wide variety of stuff. Like you worked at Democracy Now, and we worked together at a startup, and I don't know, you've just done so many like different things and had such like a varied career. And it seems like, you know, this is a niche that you slotted into doing aerospace, but you know, that certainly wasn't, it wasn't like you were 18 and you were like, time to go to school to be an aerospace engineer for my profession. Like, let me sign up for those classes.
Yeah, and I work with people who are those people, and they're great. They're also, you know, always surprised to hear my like weirdo stories, and you know, there really is a handful of like aeronautics / astronautics programs in American universities. Cal Poly is one of the closer ones to here. Purdue has a good one. Surprisingly, USC does as well, which I wouldn't have expected. But like, there's all these university programs, and people come out of them, and the companies like recruit to them. So it very much is a little small world.
And thinking about the point you made about culture, and it's interesting to me because you're in a field that it's a relatively small field that relies on a ton of technical depth in certain areas. Whereas if you think about kind of where we were together at Series Digital, you know, just kind of, you know, building kind of core infrastructure and business applications, it's a field that benefits by the presence of very strong generalists, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of, yeah, and so I can imagine how that's one of the things you bring to this field, which might not kind of know what it's missing, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because I've been in place environments like that where people are so specialized that they often overlook the value of generalists, you know, people who, you know, who, especially those who have kind of, you know, been around the block a few times and know what's out there.
Yep, and from like a sort of CTO-ish kind of perspective, sometimes the people in those types of positions in aerospace overlook the value or like never ask the questions of like build versus buy versus like custom design versus integrate off the shelf kind of questions. Yeah, what my boss right now is had previously worked at Lockheed doing hypersonic flight navigation systems, which is wild. And she was telling me about how like the simulation work is like you just build it all yourself, and like the idea of reusable libraries. This is like, you know, we're going into niche like software development stuff, but like the idea, just what I take for granted, the idea of like open source, publicly available, reusable libraries is like, I don't know. Maybe we should make our own. Like, it's a real mindset kind of thing.
No, I've worked a little bit with, you know, I remember working with somebody who had come out of the intelligence community where he had been doing telemetry for spy satellites. And I mean, this guy was genius. He was a complete genius level programmer, but he knew less about the world of software development than anyone I'd ever met that was as good as he was.
Yeah, and that is like right now, that is specifically my niche, and it's why I was brought into the Momentous team. Specifically, I'm on Inside Baseball, the GNC, or Guidance and Navigation Controls team. I have a little bit of experience working with GNC and avionics people, but not too much, and that's why they hired me, because these are like Air Force veterans who have PhDs in math, you know, Lockheed hypersonic guidance system developers, and they're working with the Julia language, which is my new favorite platform for programming complex math. It's like a scientific. It would be comparable to MATLAB,
Okay.
It's an MIT project that's been around for 10 years. It's very popular and very. The more I get into it, the more I'm like, maybe I could get good at math. But but so they're all using Julia because their background is more in mathematics and like writing these orbital determination simulations and things. And they could do it because this language lets them write, like literally write as if they were writing mathematical notation on paper. And
I'm looking
in
at
some
it.
cases,
Yeah,
it'll
yeah.
like do that for you. But
Um,
like, and this is all out on the table. Like I've been having these planning discussions currently where it's like they don't have too much experience in like how computers work. Um, and from like a kind of like DevOps infrastructure perspective, um, and are transparent about that. And I'm like transparent about like, hey, I did Calc 1 in college. Like that was a long time ago.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they're like,
yeah.
no, that's cool.
No, but
I got you.
I can imagine the value that you represent in an organization like that. It's, yeah, I mean, that must be tremendous. It must be tremendous fun.
It's super fun. And it takes things that used to feel kind of like banal, like continuous integration pipelines. And now it's
Right.
like CI pipelines that could like do like report test optimization for like orbital trajectories. And I'm like, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Lee, I feel like we could talk forever and ever, but maybe we should consider asking you to shill your shillables. What do you got? Like, are you selling anything? You got anything for sale? Are you
Yeah,
what are you making these days?
I got this energy drink.
Ooh.
Wait, don't you have an album out? Don't you have a fairly recent album?
I do have an album out. It's on Bandcamp.
Yeah.
It's my Bandcamp alias is pronounced Grift Market. It's spelled GRIFTMARKET .bandcamp.com. That is a collection of electronic music. Most of it is improvised. Many of the tracks are like live recordings. Using synthesizers and computers and guitars.
Lee is a very accomplished musician, and in fact, his senior project at Antioch was who composed piece of music on the piano.
Oh, you're making this all about Antioch. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
I should have known. I should have known.
Oh no, I didn't do any original music at Antioch. That was all performance stuff.
I see. Yeah.
But yeah, I've been 2020 definitely helped me get my piano playing skills back because I had a lot of time on my hands.
Will you drop the Bandcamp link?
Oh, right.
And we'll post it on the YouTube. And
right.
That's like what you're supposed to do, I think, is drop your Bandcamp link.
Yep.
Yeah, amazing.
Is there enough time?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there enough time? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's an abrupt transition, but I'm very proud of the Space DJ.
Yeah, tell us about
credentials.
Space DJ. Yeah, do it.
It's a concise one, but it's something that as a youth who heard that Laurie Anderson was once had the title of artist in residence at NASA, I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard. How does one get that job? Turns out I don't know if one can get that job today, but I was working on a couple of launches, and I had I was doing basically like support. I was a backup for a mission control seat, and that seat is like that is a very like person sits in chair with workstation, like it's the control room thing, and like the FAA gets a list of those names, so it's like very important that you show up and you have to take it seriously and all that. And there's like comms headsets because everyone's talking in real time, and those comms headsets also have to get sent. The recordings get sent to the FAA. So there's this. The whole thing is literally a performance that is then reviewed or can be reviewed later. but because of that, the security controls of who is authorized to listen to that stuff is pretty tight. But there are people who are training, and they couldn't hear the comms, even though technically they were going to be one of those people in one of those chairs at some point in time. So I'm like, I know how to like do like internet broadcasting of radio. So why don't I just like take this headset thing and figure out how to get this audio out of it? And so you can't transmit, and then plug it into my desktop PC, and then make like an internet stream of it, and then give the URL to people so they can listen to like, the launch director talking, and you get that cool like, or LOX load, is it a go? That kind of stuff.
Wait, so is the FAA going to come after you for violating
No. This was
security rules?
This was literally for training purposes. I got it cleared through the executive level.
I was really picturing like so, but Christian Slater will play you. This will be like in the spirit of pump up the volume.
Well, because it literally started as a like there was a new hire on my team, and he was scheduled to be mission support the next launch, and he's like, I don't know how to do it. And I was like, hey, you can listen to the audio and just sit there and like kind of see like what the general vibe is, and like when you should speak, when you should not, stuff like that. So I set this thing up. Word gets around, people start listening to it, and they're like, oh, this is really good. Then a coworker of mine was like, what if you put that YouTube channel, lo-fi hip hop beats to study and relax to, which is great. You should check that out. Behind it. And I did that, and I was like, this is surprisingly good. And then I just literally started getting more and more listeners. And then people started sharing the links and then coming up to me in person and being like, hey, I was at a training session, and I really like the broadcast that you're doing. Is it cool if I give it to zip doop doop doop? Then I started doing actual playlists and promoting independent artists that I know. And this German dude who somehow was into ambient electronic music because he lived in Berlin was like, oh yeah, you're playing some really obscure stuff. I know that one guy when I from Berlin. And it just turned into this whole thing. And
so can we listen to Space DJ or?
No, that is highly illegal. And the SEC will probably put you in jail for insider trading because you'll be able to
see who's launching,
hear live audio from all of the back channels that aren't being broadcast over the Astra live stream.
Yeah.
Well,
if there's if there's an anomaly or something, people have to work through it. So they'll talk about, I don't know,
DJ.
that sensor just isn't working right now.
I think Jonathan needs to leave us. So we unfortunately we have to go. I wish we could listen to Space DJ. I wish Space DJ could play us out, but
I know. It's
very sad.
Part of why I'm talking about it is that I want to make that dream a reality. Maybe one day.
Lee, it was so lovely to see you again. Hang out. Let's try to do this IRL. So next time you're east or I'm west.
Yeah, definitely. I might have some plans later this summer. Not sure yet.
Bye, everybody.
Why don't we? Yeah. Bye, guys.
This has been another
Lovely.
episode of Door3TV. You can find us at projects@door3.com. And thanks, Lee. Thanks, Jonathan.